joined by two gentlemen from Kitron, by Petter Nilsson, who we've spoken to many times, who's the president and CEO, and by Petter Thomassen. Hans, can you start by giving us a brief introduction to you for our viewers, since this is your first time on the show?
Absolutely, yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Petter Thomassen. I'm VP of Defense and Aerospace in the Kitron Group, and I also oversee operations in our Nordics and North America region.
Okay, quite a big task, and an interesting task at the moment with tariffs and the acceleration in the EU defense industry. I was drawn by your post on LinkedIn where you talked about attending the implementation dialogue on EU defense at the European Commission. Peter, perhaps you can start by giving me a brief introduction about on the event and why you were lucky enough, or why you were able to attend.
The EU is preparing, the EU Commission is preparing what they call an omnibus, which I gather is a bill to strengthen Europe's defense industrial base. And what they're looking for there is opportunities to make it easier for defense companies and manufacturers to ramp up production quicker. For that, obviously, they have experts. They know everything they need to know, right? But they're still looking for input from the industrial base. So the first meeting was last Monday. There were 20 CEOs from around Europe, a mixture of actually we were the only EMS there, but it was a mixture then between the massive primes like Thales and Rheinmetall and others, to the very small startups in the Baltics, down in Croatia and Slovakia or Slovenia, with more of the sort of type of drone or laser pointing instruments for drones. A lot of drone activity there. So that went on last Monday. This Monday, it was more of again, you know, the top primes, and then also they added so that you could bring two from each company to really get into it and suggest a little more of the details.
Okay. Exciting to be representing the EMS industry. Hans Petter, did you sense that the Commission and those involved in the decision making had a really solid understanding of the supply chain and the importance of the tiers of supply chain and having them connected within Europe?
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes to that. I mean, they have a very good understanding of the industry and the hurdles and the challenges we're facing. So I would say absolutely yes. I have participated in a similar effort on a national level in Norway. So this roadmap definition looks very much like the same kind of a process.
Okay, and when you did the Norwegian one, what was the output once you created the roadmap? Was there legislation around that? Were there incentives built around that? Is that what they use as their framework to build out policy?
I would say it ends up more like a guidance document for the politicians and for the parliament to so they have a clear understanding what it will take from their side. It didn't end up in a firm legislation per se on the regulatory side. However, it did shape the long-term acquisition plans, and it did outline what we from industry side need in order to execute on a long-term acquisition plan.
Yeah, when you look at it. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No, I think the real challenge here is maybe not so much, yes, electronics and components and semiconductors and PCBs and everything that goes into our products. Most of it comes from outside of Europe, and that supply chain is sensitive for any sort of disruption. But there, our option is to stockpile, to define a list of strategic materials and stockpile 3 to 5 years worth of components, and that's not something that cannot be done. It can actually be done fairly easily. And quite a few of our customers within Kitron have actually done that already for the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But on a wider scope, you really need the rest of industry with you, and you need the EU with you. I think the real challenge here is we have one concrete example for munitions manufacturers, right? Some fairly volatile and complex chemicals go into the munitions, and there the manufacturing capacity is much more limited. The permitting and environmental studies required in order to build a new facility to expand are extremely long. So if Kitron can put up an electronics factory in 10 months and be up and running at full speed in 12 months, you're looking at least 5 years to even start a chemical manufacturing factory, with about 1.5 to 4 years of that being permitting, environmental studies, and 20,000 pages of environmental impact. So that's really,
a huge challenge.
We saw one nation here, they reportedly stockpiled artillery to make sure, okay, now we have enough artillery for a year or 2 years or whatever, right? In reality, that's the amount of artillery they fire in 3 days in Ukraine.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what looks like a year's stockpile can suddenly become nothing very, very quickly if geopolitics has an impact. So when you look at those supply chains and you look at stuff that's coming from outside of Europe and that's coming out for some substantial time, is there a strategy where you secure those supply chains, you increase stock levels, and at the same time you build out capacity and you look at developing a strategy to shorten those supply chains and bring them within Europe?
I think that's long term, but really what the outlook now for Europe is we have 3, best case 5 years to get to where we need to be before the proverbial shit hits the fan with in regards to security for Europe and what the outlook is. 3 to 5 years to get there. We're not going to rebuild supply chains in 3 to 5 years. It's going to be about stockpiling. In order to stockpile correctly, right, the politicians need to start ordering the products that each individual nation needs. Like, EU is not a defense organization. It's basically a trade organization.
No.
Right? So the EU cannot do that. They can provide funds for individual nations. Individual nations should then look at doing combination in procurement. So they work more towards standardized systems and not each nation specifying details and adjustments to systems like they've done in the past. So buy more, buy together, buy in bulk, and get the volumes up there. So someone dares also investing in a new chemical manufacturing facility, because there the cost is maybe €5 billion, and to build a new electronics site, you're talking 15 million euro, right?
Yeah.
So the volumes need to come in, and that's really what everybody's looking for also.
Yeah. And do you see that happening? Do you see those long-term orders being placed by governments? We saw the bill go through in Germany, but then we had a bit of a hiccup post-election, getting things across the line. Do you see governments placing orders in the next few months that will have the kind of longevity that allows people like you to invest?
My view is, and I'm going to let Hans Petter jump in here right after. My view is that the Nordics, the Baltics, Poland, and then Germany, so the nation states around the Baltic Sea are on the forefront of ordering and deciding what they need and what they want. Already budgets there, the Polish budget is creeping closer to 5% of GDP. Sweden's at like 2.8 with 3.5 for next year, but already set to go to 5. and similar activities are going on in the other Nordic countries. So there, yes, if you're further west and further south, and you're far away from Russia, right? You're not in the same. You don't have the same sense of urgency. But Hans-Petter, go ahead.
No, I can only echo what Peter is saying there. What we see is that there are big differences among the countries. Some have really advanced their acquisition plans. Poland was really early into the game. The Nordics are following, and now the Germans are coming along. Germany and UK, they're coming along strong. So I would say everyone is within 1 year. So from the Nordic side, we're starting to see on certain commodities that they are ordering far ahead. And in order for us to determine, or even in order for us to give advice on what to secure in terms of stockpiling and security of supply of electronics, they have to determine at least what kind of systems they want in and somehow quantify it. Then we can go to work, we can give advice, we can ask for funding, and we can get the job done. But until they start coming to that level of detail that they've actually determined what they're looking for, then it's hard to do anything but give advice and give warnings.
Advice. Yeah. And based on that advice, if they do what you're asking them to do, what position does that leave you in? Do you have the capacity and the infrastructure ready to respond in the timescales that you need to respond? Because, as Peter says, it's building an electronic manufacturing services facility is much faster than a chemical facility. Are you ready to go on that, or does that require adjustments to your plans and strategies?
I think we're
Petter?
Petter, go ahead.
Or Peter?
Well, we have actually already mapped this, and basically we're capable of tripling, almost quadrupling our defense output versus our current level. I'm not saying that's not breaking a sweat or anything like that. It will require some work.
Of course.
We certainly have the infrastructure and the opportunity to do so. So from our side, we are able and willing to respond when called upon.
5 sites already.
And from an EU...
in EU.
5 sites? Yeah.
5 sites operating globally now with defense, aerospace, and security. So 4 in the EU and 1 in the US. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? And when you talk about those countries that are further away from Russia that don't feel the urgency, is the onus really on the EU to try and create a more collective, a more together strategy that includes those countries, or is it just a question of some kind of trickle down effect and waiting for them to come on board when they're good and ready?
Yes and no, I would say, because the EU has already put in place, like the European Defence Fund, the SAFE program. There are multiple programs that are common where they are borrowing money or making money available through the EU. So I would say that is, if the countries that are currently not responding to the challenge want something bang for the buck, then they need to engage. So the EU does play a significant role in that part.
But we see some differences here versus sort of regular non-defense manufacturing, especially when it comes to agility and speed, and even what we can do, because you need security clearance basically in every country you're in, right? That security clearance is nation-based. Right, so if you're security cleared in Norway for NATO, it doesn't mean that you're cleared in Poland.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then also transfer of documentation between EU nations or EEA nations so to support. Because what we do is we try to have the best people possible, but not at every site, right? So you'll have some experts in Norway, some experts in Sweden, some really good people in Poland and Lithuania and Czech. And that team, whenever we get an opportunity and a challenge to solve a problem, that team has to be able to move around between sites. But not only those experts, right? So in Sweden, in the past month, we had 1 ship from Poland working in a SMT. We had another shift from Lithuania working in final assembly, and we had I think a small shift from Norway even working on SMT, and then some experts coming in also from Norway to help manufacturing process. And you really need to be able to utilize that within the whole European region. And if it takes a year to get security clearance, that's not
it's
good.
going to slow that down.
There are digital solutions. There's trusted digital processes you can use here to make sure that this should be able to go faster and cleared in one nation. If that's your home nation, then you're trusted even when it comes to different ones, something like that.
Yeah.
Those are
I think that sounds that sounds essential. I mean, what you're doing there, Peter, is you're building a layer of agility and successfully building a layer of agility on top of a dispersed footprint, which is hugely valuable. And I think it's going to be a key to EMS success in every sector as we go forward in the uncertain geopolitical world. But what you need is administration and government to move at an equally agile, if not at an agile speed, create agile infrastructure that you can utilize to get stuff done.
I think another interesting thing here, which is a sort of difference from earlier years when it comes to defense. When usually it's the big primes all the time that are generating opportunities. Right now, there's a lot of new defense tech. There are disruptors out there. There are well-funded companies with startups that are looking to seek manufacturing, and of course, for us, that's a great opportunity because these guys, they focus on technology, on development, and then market. And they want us to do the entire thing from supply chain early days through manufacturing through invoicing to the end customer, take care of everything. So that's a new situation, which I think is a tremendous opportunity for the EMS industry.
Yeah, and I think it's an important change, isn't it? When you look at the way startups behave, and that we're seeing now more and more startups realizing where their skill set is and saying, hey, we should really just zoom in on the design and development of technology, and we should spend all our time getting that technology right and getting it embedded in the market. And hey, these guys have been manufacturing forever. They've got a lot of gray hair from it. Let's let them take care of it. That's all three of us, Peter, not just you, my friend. Is that the way you see it, Hans-Petter? Is it a question of the earlier you can get involved in those startups, the better a service you can provide them and the more value you can provide?
Yeah, we definitely have to get in touch with them when they're somewhere in between the startup and the scale up. That's the sweet spot we need to engage. And it's not like these newcomers are going to take over the entire business, but they're certainly going to supplement the big system providers, and it's volume and mass is coming back into fashion again based on the experience from the Ukraine war. So this whole aspect of drones did not really exist to any large extent going back 5 years now. It's becoming massive volume, and it's to some extent cost sensitive because it is a replacement of ammunition. So it's definitely changing the game. There are some newcomers that have been growing dramatically, and they didn't even exist 5 years ago.
And do they come from a specific region? I mean, earlier, I think in our conversation, Peter, you mentioned some countries in the Baltics that are have been particularly innovative, and you're seeing some interesting startups. Is there particular locations you're seeing that?
I think really all of the Eastern European nations, in some sense of it, or at some scale, are doing this. But I've seen interesting examples from Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Slovakia, Croatia. I mean, I've met guys over the past couple of weeks. I've met the CEOs of these companies and discussed their products and looked at the technology. So some of it is super interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting when if you can get those technologies if you can whet the appetite of government for those new technologies, and there isn't a ridiculously long, slow process to get from innovation to a product that is approved and is, purchased in volume, and perhaps having a manufacturing partner like Kitron is key to, showing your capability to support those end customers,
especially if they're providing technology. So if you're in the drone market, but you don't build drones, you build technology that goes onto drones or that are used by drones. So one particular company which I found really interesting was targeting lasers, carried by drones. Then this is when you looked at how the U.S. deployed forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, where they have forward operating teams that paint targets with the laser, right? And they're really out there. They're vulnerable. Right now there are drones where there's lasers that can go on drones and take care of that whole thing, painting that target. And I found that to be really interesting when I looked at it.
Yeah,
that a Lithuanian company.
Yeah, and to add a little color to it also, we see that there is a lot of donation programs funded by MODs in the Nordics and all over Europe, and they're using those as sort of testing grounds for new technologies brought into the battlefield in the Ukraine. They get extremely quick feedback whether this works or not, and then they're actually using both to obviously to support the Ukrainian defense effort, but they're also using this to test new technology. Is it viable?
Yeah.
Is it usable?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? What you're seeing is these regions that are naturally innovative and have a startup culture, but also feel the risk because of their proximity to Russian borders and to what they're seeing happening in Ukraine. So it's a combination of factors that's pushing that innovation, a combination of capability and urgency and desire, I guess.
Yeah, urgency is really, I mean, I've been on numerous events where also there is representation at times from the Ukraine and say, a system you can provide me 2 years from now, it has zero interest to me. I need something you can bring with me to the field tomorrow. And I might be able to wait for 2 weeks, but 2 years is out of the question.
Yeah, it's not viable. Yeah. So your ability to scale manufacturing and your ability to get new technology to them quickly becomes absolutely essential. Fascinating topic, and I think we're going to see more and more on this. I know IPC have got a event in Brussels specifically on defence on the 10th of June. So I'm looking forward to being at that event and actually moderating a couple of the roundtables there. Hopefully, I'll see you guys there.
Will do.
We'll both be there.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to that very much, gentlemen. In the meantime, thanks so much for talking to me today. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.